It's a great privilege to be here today. Thank you for having us. And it's been 30 years now.
Thank you for that reminder.
Since you walked into classes in conveyancing and taxation and other delights. So what are your memories of the law school?
My memories of law school at Glasgow are overwhelmingly really good and happy and positive ones, but I guess on that first day and probably for a wee while after that, after I walked through the doors, I was terrified because, you know, I was in this new environment surrounded by people that back then I all thought were much cleverer than I was. So there was probably from my first day to the first Christmas holiday, I just was, I'm not sure this is a place for me. But from then onwards, you know, it's a place that I remember with an enormous amount of fondness. I had, you know, a great time there. I loved studying law. I didn't spend very much time after university practicing law, but a lot of what I learned there, both academically and in a wider sense, did so much to equip me for everything that has happened since in my life.
Looking back on your days on the law school, how would you say that it was a preparation for the career which you went on to have after you graduated and went into politics?
What I got from a legal education was, firstly, I think, a real discipline in terms of trying to understand an issue, get my head round what the salient and really important facts in any issue are, and how to sort of process that properly. I also developed, I think, an ability to think logically and rationally, which is always important in politics. It maybe doesn't appear as if it's always important in politics, particularly these days, but I'm a great believer that that ability to be rational and logical and think your way through things is really important. And I got all of that. I also got, which is maybe not peculiar to legal education, but from any academic study, the ability to work under pressure and really, you know, learn to summarise information. All of that is good. And with a legal education, the ability to think about how you take information from a theoretical place and argue it in public and create an argument around it. So all of that was really invaluable. I think also in me, it didn't create this in me, but it certainly underlined and reinforced this in me, was a real sense of social justice and the law as a force for positive change.
Thank you very much, First Minister. I have to say that your career is evidence that you learned all these things very adequately.
Well, I had good teachers.
Thank you.
First Minister, thank you for providing a voice to our exhibition, 100 Voices for 100 Years. The first question I have today is about the profile of lawyers. So lawyers tend to have two particular images, I think. Either the kind of the hotshot lawyer portrayed in the movies and the kind of more serious, perhaps money-making type. And I would hazard a guess that most people think of a man when they think about the legal profession. What's your experience of the legal profession and indeed what law can do or achieve?
In my experience of the legal profession, it is still predominantly male at the upper reaches of it, although there are many, many more women coming into law and into the profession. But like so many other walks of life, it still has a gender imbalance in terms of, you know, the boardrooms, the decision making, the judicial offices, and that has to change. The law is a force for change, and we need to see the law in a way that is about making sure that we try to use it to address some of the imbalances and injustices and inequities that still go through our society. And the profession has to reflect that in and of itself, if I think the legal profession then is to become that proper agent for progressive change.
Were you ever aware or made aware of your gender while at university or indeed later in your career?
Oh, yes. I mean, looking back at my time at university, I'm not sure I was aware of it in the sense of, you know, it was a real barrier. But I do remember, you know, because even in my year at university, which is 30 years ago, my year was majority female. So even then, The majority coming into law school were women, but I was very aware of the mismatch between that and what I could see of the profession at all levels from that vantage point. So I was very aware that there was this gulf between, what I was experiencing myself in law school and what I was looking ahead to entering after university. And that definitely was something that was quite stark. And 30 years on, that imbalance has maybe got a bit better, but it hasn't completely been addressed. More generally, gender is an issue for anybody in any walk of life, and I would defy anybody, man or woman, to say otherwise. Looking back in my career, both legally and perhaps more relevantly in politics, it's difficult to point to the specific instances where I would say I was stopped doing something because I was a woman, that I was, discriminated against in that very overt way. But the experience of women in politics is very different often to the experience of men. You're treated differently, you're judged differently. The narrative and language that's used to describe you is very, very different. And today, I think younger women, and this is probably true in all walks of life, it's certainly true of politics, face much more, partly because of the social media phenomenon, much more in the way of direct abuse and sexism and misogyny. So we've made great strides forward in some ways, but I'm reminded on a daily basis, both personally and what I witness elsewhere, that there is still a long way to go.
So building on from what you said, it makes me think about self-care. How do you look after yourself?
It's probably a difficult question for me to answer, because the life I lead and the sort of job I do just now, it's very difficult to switch off at all, because you're kind of on duty all the time. So I'm probably not the best person to try to talk about self-care, but I do, and increasingly I find that I do make more conscious efforts around that. I read a lot, so reading fiction in particular is one of the ways I choose to try to switch off, or just to give myself a different perspective on things. I like to try and read a little bit before I go to sleep at night, no matter how late it is, because I find that it shifts, whatever it is my brain has been focused on all day. So that I try to, and usually not very successfully, to do some exercise, and just to find the time to devote to family, to my husband. That can be really, really difficult, but it's really important, I think, to do things that enable you to take a bit of a step back, particularly if you're doing a job that's highly pressured and frenetic and 100 miles an hour pace, to take a step back and just remember what's important and what's not important. And for me, reading is probably the thing that enables me to do that most.
Madge Easton-Anderson is a graduate of Glasgow University like yourself, and was the first female solicitor in Scotland and indeed the UK 100 years ago. And like you, she decided at the outset to use her legal knowledge to assist those that might be described as most in need. Madge worked as a poor man's lawyer in the Anderston community of Glasgow in the 1930s, and your first legal practice experience was doing something similar in a law centre in Glasgow. Can you tell us about why you chose that particular path? And was this experience formative in your decision to help others through a political rather than a legal career?
Yeah, so my time in the law centre in Drumchapel was actually the last job I did in the law, not the first. And it was because I trained in a corporate law firm. I then did a couple of years of practice in a more general practice firm. And I think, if I'm being honest, I wasn't really happy in any of these jobs. It just didn't feel like what I wanted to do. It didn't feel like the thing that would keep getting me up in the morning and going into work feeling passionate about what I did. And then when I went to work in the law centre in Drumchapel, that changed. I suddenly thought, this is the kind of law I want to do. It's about helping people who are in the most vulnerable situations, who have nowhere else to go often. And it is also about using that experience to think about where we really do need to press ahead with social change. So what I did in the law centre was largely, it was a lot of debt advice work, a lot of housing law, social welfare law, and as well as helping people, it also gave me a real insight into, where do we need to see the sort of political and economic change. And I felt happy there. And if I hadn't gone into I was already involved in politics at the time. And I think one of the reasons why I felt much more comfortable there seemed to be a greater synergy between what I was spending my days doing and then what I was spending all my free time doing, which was campaigning for political change. Suddenly the two bits of my life felt more in harmony, and I felt that I was getting up in the morning and doing something I really cared about. I then went into elected politics and became a member of the Scottish Parliament. Had I not done that, then working in that environment is absolutely what I would have wanted to continue to do. And having done that, my role now as a constituency member of Parliament, I learned so much there, because the kind of things that come through my door in constituency surgeries now are very similar to the kind of problems I was helping deal with in the Law Centre.
So fighting for gender equality is a collective endeavour. Do you agree? And how can men support women in their career?
I absolutely 100% agree that it's a collective effort. Fighting for gender equality is not just the responsibility of women. Men have a big responsibility to be part of achieving gender equality. I also increasingly believe that in order to achieve gender equality, we've got to stop talking as if it's women who need fixed. It's actually the systems that hold women back or don't allow women in that need fixed. So often when we're talking about trying to get greater gender representation on boards or in public bodies, we talk about trying to help women or encourage women to come forward, to encourage women to think about what they need to do to take on these roles. That's not the right way to come at it. We need to think about what it is in these systems that is holding women back. So it's absolutely a collective effort, and it's one that we have to come at from the right angle, and men have to play their part. They really have to step up, because sometimes enabling more women to have the places they deserve on merit, we don't just need more women to come forward, we sometimes need men to step back.
Do you have any personal ambitions for the fight for equality in your current position?
I just want to continue to use my current post-platform influence to push forward gender equality as far as possible. When I first became First Minister, appointed a cabinet that was gender balanced, and that was entirely on merit. I didn't have to promote women that didn't deserve to be there. I have to say my cabinet right now is not gender balanced. It is for the first time majority women, which will be one of the few governments anywhere in the world that can say that. That in and of itself is not enough, but it does mean that we're leading by example in the Scottish Government, and by having women around the table, we're better placed to push gender equality forward.
What message would you send to young children and teenagers, and particularly young females, thinking about their futures and their future careers today?
Believe in yourself, follow your dreams, don't let anybody tell you that what it is you want to do is the wrong path for you to take because you're a girl. Be clear and ambitious, and don't let people put you off. If I think back to my younger days, I remember vividly sitting in front of a careers advisor at school who told me that people like me didn't become lawyers, and it didn't put me off back then, but it might have done. So be firm in what you want to do, take advice, learn from people around you, but absolutely be firm in what it is you want to achieve.
First Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.